We all remember recess growing up in school. Recess was a time of day where you could have all the conversations that you could not have in class. Recess is where the real conversations are had, and real conversations are what we're gonna have. In each episode of the Recess Podcast, I'm gonna have real conversations explaining students in school. I'm your host, David McGuire. It's recess time, y'all. What's up, good people? Happy December. David McGuire here, host of the Recess Podcast, back. I know y'all missed me last week, took a break off. Happy Thanksgiving, happy holidays, but back with another amazing episode. And this is part one of a new series called #FreePD. Because on the Recess Podcast, in addition to giving real conversations, we like to offer you some free PD. And today, I got a special treat because not only is this free PD, because when I tell you, man, this brother is killing it right now. He's a mentor. He's a big brother. He's a friend. He's just an all around amazing guy. Educator, speaker, father, husband, man of God, Dr. Brian Dinkins. We're here with Emotionally Inclusive Practices with Dr. Dinkins. How you doing, brother?
What up? Listen, bro, I wanted to do that all my life, man. So you just blessed my soul, man. Gave me an opportunity. I appreciate it, bro. Hey, man, I'm at the Recess Podcast, brother. I'm having a moment. I didn't know it was going to ever happen, bro. I've been a fan. I've been following. I've been trolling, brother. And the work that you're doing is bringing us to a whole nother level of enlightenment, brother. So I'm just glad to be on the podcast and excited to share, man. Excited to share.
Listen, I'm glad you were here, and this is the perfect time. It's December. So let me just say this before this is a podcast. This is a podcast for educators. Now, it's a podcast for parents too. But when I tell you educators, when you listen to this is why this series, #FreePD, we're talking about emotionally inclusive practices. And I'm gonna be honest, this is new to me. So I'm taking this in with everybody else. But before we jump into that, I kind of gave the bio, but your story leads into why you do this work. So just who is Brian Dinkins?
Yeah, man, that's a heavy question, man. I feel like I'm still trying to figure that out with two girls, man, who teaching me every day how to be a better man, a better dad. But I'm an inner city kid, Indianapolis, Indiana, projects, Jamestown, shout out. Raised by a mom who was an educator. Now she was a special education aide, right? Educator still. Told myself not going to do education, but she modeled, man, for me and my brothers with love, kindness, care, commitment, what true education was, bro. And so, I'm gonna make the long story short. Went to Arlington High School, mentored, mothered by Dr. Jackie Greenwood. And I didn't have a plan, man, when I left Arlington except to go play football. Ended up at Purdue University, had a great time, went to the Rose Bowl, won a Big Ten championship, got a psychology degree, didn't know what I was going to do with it. Brought it back to Indianapolis after working out professionally, didn't get picked up by a team, and started substitute teaching. Found a passion and love for children, particularly children who look like you and me, black, brown, beautiful, brilliant, hard situations, but wanting to be loved and educated. And so I found a pathway to education, man. Went to Oakland City, got a master's in special ed, became a special education teacher, working with some of our most beautiful, sometimes most marginalized, disenfranchised children, but loved them anyway, challenged them, helped them to become the best version of themselves. And my path took me to Butler University, where I'm currently the director of educational leadership. I did 2 years there to get my admin and started leading schools, man. Went back to the old neighborhood, started leading as a school principal. And my eyes opened up, bro. That was the time probably when I started to see disenfranchisement and poverty and the impacts of it on education up close. And not only that, I had a heavy responsibility of cultivating the community and academic expectations so our children could have success. And so did 2 elementary schools, 2 high schools as principal. I'm in my 23rd year, man, 23rd year in this work. of serving, loving, and just trying to provide conditions that allow for excellent educators like yourself, man, to do the work. I have been a fan of yours and have been so excited to see you do great things. But there's still a whole lot more work to do, right? Whole lot more work to do, and you're creating the opportunities to have the conversation about it.
Man, that's amazing. It's powerful to hear, like you said, here you are, high school kid, right, without a plan. Fast forward because of the love and the support of those in your life, but also your own will, right, and your own hard work. And now we fast forward, and now you're Dr. Dinkins, right? Did you ever think, right, real quick, before we jump into emotionally inclusive practice, just simple, did you ever think, did 18-year-old Brian Dinkins ever see himself as Dr. Brian Dinkins, speaker, educator, leader, like all those things?
Dr. McGuire, man, you hitting so much, bro. I'm gonna try to hold my emotions together, man. I graduated high school with a 1.9 GPA, right? Had to go to night school, take 3 classes over. Had to make straight. I mean, I knew my educators loved me. I know they love me, right? I know they love to watch me run that rock. They love to cheer me on the track and field and the football field. But who is it that says, "Don't let school get in the way of your education"? Mark Twain. That was my reality, bro. School got in the way of my education because my educators didn't allow me to see the value and strengths that I had inside of me. I love to learn, man. I didn't learn it until my adulthood that I love to learn. I just didn't like school. I don't like school now. Don't tell nobody.
No, don't tell nobody. Right.
Professor, director, still don't like school, but I love to learn, man. So I would have never in a million years have thought I'd be a doctor, a professor, a principal. None of that, man, because for us, particularly as Black men, we don't see a lot of us doctors, principals, teachers. And so it's kind of hard to become something that you don't see, man. But I'm glad about it.
That's amazing. So look, this is free PD. We about to give it to the folks, right? So emotionally inclusive practices.
Yeah.
What is it, and how do you see this impacting teacher practice?
Yeah.
So tell the folks what it is, and then how you see it impacting teacher practice.
So if I can, let me take us on a quick journey, man. I had been a school leader, had worked in urban schools, had gone back to my old high school, elementary. I started my doctorate at Ball State, took Jeremy Coleman, your cousin, with me. And Jason Smith, took him with me too. I said, let's go get our doctors, bro. And in the midst of this coursework, I was introduced to an ACE assessment, adverse childhood experiences. Didn't know what that was, had never heard it, had been through 4 degrees. No one had ever talked to me about what trauma was, what an ACE was. Here I'm working on my 5th degree. I'm working in urban schools, and somebody is elevating my awareness to it. I took this ACE assessment, which the ACE assessment stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences, which is an opportunity for us to evaluate and identify possible childhood traumas that we've experienced that may have negative implications on us as adults. Bro, I took this assessment created by the CDC, 10 questions. Have you ever dealt with physical abuse? Yep. Sexual abuse? Yes. Homelessness? Yes. Parent incarcerated? Yes. Yes. I scored an 8 out of 10. I almost scored perfect on the assessment. And it blew my mind so much. I asked the professor, I said, hey, what does this mean? Does this mean I'm broken? He said, no, it just means you need to start investigating as an educator how your childhood life lived experiences are impacting you now in leadership, as a teacher, as a father, as a husband. And so after that, I went home, Dr. McGuire, I was angry, man. I was angry. Now, I wasn't angry that I had experienced trauma. I was angry that you letting me work through 5 degrees and nobody has ever introduced me to ACEs. And I'm working in schools that are historically marginalized, high violent, and the likelihood of trauma is highly likely, man. How in the world you let me be a principal and not expose me? So I asked him, I said, hey, what's next? He said, you need to take this course on positive psychology, and they're going to introduce you to emotional intelligence. This is before SEL, right? This is before Castle expanded emotional intelligence. And I said, okay. I took the course. They had me take an emotional intelligence appraisal. Now, I didn't even know what that was, right? I'm over for ACEs and emotional intelligence. I took this assessment. What the assessment was created to do was measure our emotional intelligence. Bro, I bombed that one too. But what it did for me was heighten my awareness of my emotions, how I respond to triggers, how I respond to confrontation, conflict. Poor score. I spent 6 months studying 60 strategies, and my life literally changed. It helped me to identify what my triggers, develop self-awareness strategies that we'll share a little bit tonight. It helped me build social awareness so that I could read the emotional well-being of my faculty and staff, of my students, of my parents. My wife even said, baby, I can tell you've changed. You're a much better empathetic listener. You know what I'm saying? You respond to frustrations much differently. It changed my life. So I said, David, man, if it works for me, maybe it'll work for teachers too. So I did my doctorate dissertation on the emotional intelligence of teachers, impact on the behavior outcomes of African-American male students. What I wanted to know was if I help teachers build their emotional intelligence, could they create emotional safety for young men like me, like you, like my baby brother who's been in and out of prison because we experienced trauma and didn't know what to do with it. And so I found this school, 1,500 students, 100 teachers. I gave them appraisal. Most of them looked like they had failed their entrance exam into college, man. And I said, hold up, it's okay. The beautiful part about us is we have IQ, which is pretty fixed, but EQ can grow with practice and strategy, and the implications are unbelievable. I gave them 7 hours. Dude, their EQ grew statistically significant. Relationships improved, with the teachers that practice, and we'll talk about that. And so I created, man, emotionally inclusive practices out of that research that I've now been able to share, man, for the last 24 months around the country. There are schools and districts who are adopting the framework that includes 6 core practices that start with emotional intelligence and help build that skill, man, in teachers so they can love themselves and love the students that they serving, man.
Man, that's amazing. So you talked about it. So you created this practice and you said it in your dissertation, right? We're improving teacher practices to ultimately improve student outcomes. And you specified, Black males. But when you're speaking to schools and you talked about it, and I know you're at schools all across the country. So it's not just Black males. It's, Black girls. It's young, white boys and white Hispanic kids. So it's all over. So when you think about what's the impact on teacher practice?
Yeah.
And then what's the impact on student outcome?
That's good, man. So let's put it in perspective, right? So as we start with practice 1, and it's 6 practices, right? First practice is emotional intelligence. The more skill we can build in heightened awareness of our emotions, our triggers, then we build the skill of managing that emotion. Because I ask teachers, I even ask principals, I say, tell me the top 5 triggers that you have in your school that just arrest you emotionally, take you to dark places. And most of them have never written their triggers down, right? And so if you don't have a heightened sense of awareness of your triggers, it's likely they owning you every single day. And we're not prisoners to our emotions. We just need to elevate our awareness so that then we can build, which is the second skill, self-management. When I can build self-management strategies that allow me to co-regulate, that allow me to do deep belly breathing, that allow me to catch myself so I don't say harmful things to children or others in my dysregulated space, that it creates an emotionally healthy classroom that helps me protect my emotional well-being, right? Because after I have built awareness and then management, now I'm practicing social awareness. That's my ability to identify the emotions of others. When little Bobby walks in your classroom like this, if you don't ask him how he doing, he gonna show you in 5 minutes, right? And the truth is, there are a lot of teachers who lack it, who are picking on the kid who didn't sleep last night, fought with their parents in the morning, is ready to explode, and you are lacking the emotional awareness to see that. So when I can create those conditions because I have first prioritized my own skill, then ultimately we get to the last skill, which is relationship management. Believe it or not, and you know this, relationship makes the world go round. But we assume everybody knows how to build relationships, and that's not true. It's not true. Emotional intelligence is at the foundation of how we interact with each other, ourselves, in the world. So you're talking about what are the implications for teacher practice? Emotional resolve, management of emotional triggers, providing emotional safety for students, building healthy relationships. Because we know children, first of all, don't learn from people they don't like. Two, when they feel a sense of emotional and psychological safety, there is a greater sense of self, relationships, connections, engagement in our learning activities. Because I've seen it, man. Me and Dr. Coleman, man, we travel, seek schools, we watch babies go into one class, sit down, do everything the teacher asks them to do, answer questions, engage, go next door and destroy the class. We go, why you do that? Because I don't like them. So the implications, man, are broad and out there.
Man, I told y'all, hashtag free PD. We gave him the warning again. So we talked about, right, that impact on teacher practice. You even talked, you started to tease it when you talked about the student that goes in one room, sits down, does all their work, is engaged. That sounds like the teacher that is in tune,
Yeah,
right, with their emotions, right? And they probably utilize those strategies. But then you talked about the next room where they go and they tear it up, and it's because that phrase, I don't like them. So when you think about that outcome on student outcome, that student, let's use that student and think about the ups and downs of a staff that is not really, that doesn't have high emotional inclusive practices, and ones that have low. When you have a student that experiences those different teachers,
yeah.
how does that impact their outcome in school?
Man, that's crazy. You know, it's interesting you say that. I use myself as an example in my training, right? Father was an alcoholic, he's a substance abuser. He come home 3 o'clock in the morning playing Luther Vandross. Wakes us up out of our sleep. Now we got to go to school hungry and angry. The teachers who practice emotional intelligence and emotional safety, before we were talking SEL or emotional intelligence, they created safety for us. They could see we had experienced some form of confrontation. They brought us in their class. Miss Jones would say, "Hey, baby, go get you a granola bar out of my drawer. Take you a nap, and then we'll start learning." The teachers who lack that skill would ultimately send us to the front office, and we end up suspended and expelled from school. So you're talking about teachers who have the skill to identify not only themselves, but the emotional needs of children who live in a community and culture that gives us so much trouble. Now, watch this. Before going to Butler, I was the director of culture and climate and SEL implementation over the largest school district in Indianapolis. We were responsible for putting Second Steps curriculum in classrooms and teachers teach. We would observe those teachers teaching the curriculum. They would teach awesome lessons. We would come back and observe them. We went to one classroom. We observed the teacher letting a student have it, screaming on the student. The student looked at the teacher and said, "Didn't you just teach us not to do that this morning?"
Woo!
Listen, you know what we learned, big bro? We missed a step, man. We had given teachers access to curriculum to teach skills that we had not taught teachers the skills. So what happened was we were expecting to see students utilize these skills that we were teaching, but the teachers were not modeling them because they had not mastered them themselves. And we know students, they don't care what come out your mouth. They want to see what it is that you're trying to teach us. And so we had to go back, man, and teach teachers and provide learning around SEL for them, so they can not only teach it but model it. You feel me?
Hey, listen. Listen, I've always said this. Kids, drunks, and old people will tell you the truth. That student, he or she said, "Didn't you just teach us?"
Come on.
Right? So, okay, you know, this had me thinking. Your story had me thinking about something early in my school leader days, and now, again, Recess Podcast, free PD,
Yeah.
emotionally inclusive practice with Dr. Dinkins. Let me tell you what you just did to me. I started reflecting on my leadership. I was early in my principalship, right? When you're a principal and you're trying to turn around a school that checks all those boxes that people have for low socioeconomics, high students of color, right? Low performance, quote unquote, unengaged parents. You want to put in all these systems, and we're going to be very militant and nothing wrong with militant. We're going to be very structured and orderly. One of our things was doors open at 7:45. The first period starts at 8:05. So that's 7:45, 8:05. That's breakfast time. So we're trying to get parents and get their kids to school on time. So our rule was if you're not there by 8:05, what do? We close the breakfast doors.
Yep.
That was the rule. Now, our babies, right? Everything happens. Mom or dad, single parent, they trying to get 4-5 kids done. We're trying to comb this hair, iron this shirt. We're not getting there, Mr. McGuire, Dr. McGuire, at 8:05. I'm sorry, I'm trying, but I'm not getting there, right? My baby didn't eat. But the school, the principal has told the staff, ain't no breakfast at 8:05. Now you got these hungry, angry kids acting up, and instead of feeding them, we send them to the office. That's what happens to when the leader, right, is not in tune with that right there. In that, I just reflected on that. Now I don't do that practice anymore. But think about how many kids I suspended or called home or sent to the office or took privileges away from because they were simply hungry.
Yeah.
And we had plenty of food to give them.
Dr. McGuire, you taking me to the same place, brother. If I could go back, man,
come on now,
do it again.
Come on.
And that's what learning really does, man. I mean, learning allows us deep reflection on our past and present practices. And that's really what drives me to be out in these streets, man, supporting schools, because there are a lot of things that we did. We did what we knew to do, but there are a lot of teachers and leaders who don't know because no one has ever exposed them to this knowledge and wisdom. A self-management strategy: eat and sleep. You ever been hangry before?
Yep.
Listen. Teachers, we are notorious for not eating and not going to bed at night. We wake up and come into our spaces unprepared to manage our own emotions and the emotions of our students. So that is a poor practice because no one has taught us what is necessary to regulate the most important part of us, which allows us to build healthy communities in our classrooms. Watch this. You know who the most isolated human in schools are? The principals.
Who? Come on now, preach.
Nobody's checking on the principals, man. And this is crazy. I sit in meetings. Sometimes I sit in offices and sometimes cry with the principals because nobody from central office is checking. No, they expect them to have all the answers. And what happens is because they're the center of this huge system, and they've not prioritized their own emotional well-being, and all the frustrations and accountability we put in place and people not meeting them, if we're not healthy, sometimes we create unhealthy conditions from everybody else. So it's not just students, not just teachers, it's principals, it's social workers, it's counselors. We're talking about the foundation of community, right? But if we're not investing in building our own awareness, it has been eating away at our school community for years. And now we have the opportunity to elevate our awareness and create conditions that are emotionally safe. Emotion is normal.
Man, you got so many gems. I want to ask you this question.
Yeah, man.
Before we get into like our last two kind of topics.
Yeah.
Tell me this, and this is for our teachers out there, because we got a lot of young teachers, right? Here I am. I'm 22 years old. I'm excited about teaching. So, Dr. Dinkins, I am the first one in the building. Teachers ain't got to be there till 7. I'm there at 6:15. Dark as heck outside. I'm there early.
Yeah.
Okay. I am I'm at all the duties where I'm supposed to be, right? And I'm pulling kids during my lunch, during my prep. So I'm not eating, I'm not taking my prep, I'm not taking my mental break. Then on top of that, right, I run a club. Great. We want you to be engaged. But then when the club is over at 6, I'm staying there to do my lesson plan. So then I ain't getting home till 8:30, right? But when I get home at 8:30, I got these papers to grade. So I'm eating kind of, but not eating. Then I go to bed at 11 and I'm repeating this cycle. Let me ask you this. If I give you that description of a teacher, is that a teacher that probably would do well with some emotionally inclusive practices? Yes or no?
I think any teacher would do well with prioritizing their emotional well-being, man. But I think, and again, this goes back to us in our reflection of leaders. We know, particularly working in urban education, it requires a lot of us. It does. And sometimes we ask our teachers to give everything that they have. But you know what happens? They give everything they have, and then they give their leftovers to their families at home. And then they resent the school and the students because
And the profession.
that's right, and the profession, because they've given everything they got, rightly so, but we've not equipped them to create the conditions that protect their emotional well-being, to create conditions of safety for students and parents too. Because watch this, emotional intelligence is just the first practice. The second is restorative community. When was the last time in a college course they taught you how to repair a relationship, right? I have principals that say, hey, I know you helping my teachers with students. Can you help my teachers with teachers? Man,
with their colleagues.
They walking past each other like they don't even know it, because we've not created a restorative mindset that allows us to repair relationships after the inevitable, right? Implicit bias. That's practice 3. Have you investigated your unconscious ideas about people who look like you, who don't look like you, who have different experiences than you? Because it impacts our culture. Cultural consciousness is practice 4. Have you investigated your lived experiences, your language, your socioeconomic status? How does it impact the culture that you create? Do you know the mission and vision of your school? And watch this, emotion impacts all of that. Practice 5 is trauma sensitivity. There's research is being completed now, not only on children, but the negative implications of COVID on the adults, on the principals. There was a professor came to Butler, man, and trained us, blew my mind. Said, hey, during COVID, using the wrong language. They told us when the virus showed up that we should socially distance ourselves. What they should have been telling us is to physically distance ourselves. We didn't need to be socially disconnected. We just needed to create physical space to protect ourselves. So you know what people did? They retreated. They retreated
6
to
feet
their
apart.
homes.
Yeah.
They
Don't
turned
talk to
off
me.
their cell phones, and they truly socially distanced themselves. And that was a time that we needed each other more than ever before. So what has happened now that we've come back and we're getting back to normal, but it's a new normal. Now people understand I can be isolated and live, but it's still unhealthy because we need each other as a fundamental need to connect. And so we have to identify our own traumas, our own experiences, those of children. And then the last practice, bro, is equitable. So how do we create systems to evaluate how well we're culturally connected, how well our teachers and leaders and children are mastering their emotions and building relationships? How are we creating community when our definitions of community is different, in repairing relationships when there is a breach? Those things work interconnectedly, and the research shows most schools adopt one, but we can interconnect these in a way that allow them to create a comprehensive culture that allows us to love on each other, man, and do the work.
Man, I love that. So look, here, there's a lot in there, and people just like we do with the lesson, right? So I've listened to this, but I need to know from Dr. Dinkins, what do I need to take from this? So when I'm listening to this, I'm getting to the end, and I'm trying to reflect on it. The question is, how do you see emotionally inclusive practices impacting the education space? Now, we talked about it in this show, but wrap it up for the folks. Put a bow on it. When you think about you doing this work and you got touch points all over the country, you got touch points with our future administrators, right? With the work that you do, at Butler, you got the touch point with teachers that lean on you or aspiring teachers, right? And everything that you do. When you look at as our EIP, right? What impact do you see? Because what I see is this, and quickly, I see this as we wonder why teachers are leaving the profession. You mentioned it earlier when you said because they're not feeling themselves, they're not in tune with themselves, right? Whatever they have left to give to those that they love or themselves, they don't have it, and so they're jaded by the profession and they leave. That's what I see, the impact. But what do you see in the work that what are you trying to do with the work that you do?
That's good, man. So let me start by saying this. I'm going to drop it in. So for everybody who is participating, if you go to www.briandinkins.com, you visit my web page and you send me a message saying you heard about EIP through the Recess podcast, I'm going to send you a 65-page workbook that has all the emotionally inclusive practices in it for free. All you got to do is drop the Recess podcast. You can go do my Facebook page, my Instagram page, the same. Because what I want to provide for you is a resource, because right now I'm sharing, but the work has to extend past just talk. It requires practice. There's an actual 4A continuum that we use that starts with awareness. A is awareness. I've shared some things, only the top of the cake, right? We even got down to the good stuff. Awareness is the beginning of things. Attitude about what you're hearing is second. But the third is the most important, and that's aptitude. That means we have to practice so that we can do the last A, and that's apply real time. So Dr. McGuire, when you say what am I hoping people to take away? What I'm hoping that they take away is recognizing that academic learning is and has to be the priority of our schools. But what's killing us in many, many academic environments is we've not set the conditions for learning that allow us all to be successful. I'm a real quick, so I bought my daughters a fish tank, man. Both of them got their own fish tank. I bought fish for them. Bro, I put the fish in. They was dead before the night was over. I mean, it was so traumatic. But what happened, I didn't do my research. I didn't set the temperature and conditions for the water so I could put the fish inside of them to live. And that's what we do in school. We have people show up, but we don't set the conditions. What are the conditions? Prioritizing the emotional safety of every stakeholder in their school so they can manage all the interactions that are coming. Not only prioritize for children, but start with the principal. The principal is the visionary. If the principal does not have a vision or knowledge of creating conditions that allow all the stakeholders to grow in this space, it'll be a challenge. So they've got to be visionaries. Once they adopt emotionally inclusive practices, SEL, cultural consciousness, these are all frameworks that exist. They have to commit to them and implement them with they can benefit them. But ultimately, it requires self-love, man. Self-love requires, and this is crazy. You get on a plane, the stewardess is going to say if the event that the airplane begins to descend, mask will fall, put the mask on you first. We've got to create conditions that give teachers, leaders, social workers permission to put their masks on first. We're often demonized as educators for taking care of ourselves first, and we've got to kill that mindset and that philosophy. When we can help the adults prioritize themselves, they'll naturally prioritize the needs of children. So it's a whole much more, man. This is 2 days of training. I'm trying to get it on the Recess podcast, brother. But again, I want to give resources. So let me know.
Listen, you gave us everything we needed. So listen, folks, you heard what Dr. Dinkins said. Go to his website. Repeat that website one more time.
www.briandinkins.com. Yep.
You reference the Recess Podcast. Tell Dr. Dinkins, I heard you on the Recess Podcast talking about emotionally inclusive practices. I need the help. He's going to drop you the document. What I want you to do is, after you go through that document, because this is the teaser, hit up. There you go. Oh, there it is. Hit up Dr. Dinkins. Get him to your school. Get him in front of your teachers and your leaders and your school community. Listen, Dr. Dinkins, brother, I appreciate you. This is how I wanted part one to go. And so, again, this has been part one. I told the folks, 3-part series. Part 2, January the 9th, The Limitless Leader. And then closing out with part 3, January 16th, The Power of Relationships. So we're giving you emotionally inclusive practices. We're giving you how to be a limitless leader. And then the bookend, because this is what we've been talking about, is the power of the relationship. So stay tuned. Again, this has been the Recess Podcast. This has been episode 6, part 1 of #free PD, emotionally inclusive practice with Dr. Dinkins. As I always say, create the platform, control the conversation, change the culture. See y'all next time. This has been the Recess Podcast, and I'm your host, David McGuire. If you want to interact more with the Recess Podcast, subscribe to our YouTube page at the Recess Podcast. Follow us on Twitter, the Recess Podcast 1, and subscribe and like wherever you get your podcasts. As I always say, create the platform, control the conversation, change the culture. See you next episode.